Hey, so just had a couple of thoughts as I was migrating my website today from one host to another. It's a WordPress website, um, and it was reminding me why I dislike the way technology is done currently, because it has a lot to do with every website has their own interpretation of the way a user should interact with fundamental principles. And while like stylistic choices are often considered a fun and interesting part of technology, I would argue that it actually makes a lot of things worse in some ways. So, where was I going with this? Let's see. So yeah, it's really annoying to have to use different metaphors and different interpretations of the same technology in a user interface, because it feels more like you having to memorize the nuances of someone new that you met, and it makes it more difficult for you to generalize the lesson that you're learning from interacting with that piece of software to other pieces of software. For example, with migrating a website, you have to set up DNS records. DNS is the domain name service, and it is the system that allows websites to translate. Not websites. It allows your browser and other computers to translate the names of websites into their unique IP addresses. So you have a unique name and it's mapped to a unique IP address. You can't remember IP addresses, so that's why we have DNS. And unfortunately, different websites have different explanations for terminology that is used in DNS, and DNS itself is generally pretty opaque, particularly because it is a really unintuitive collection of acronyms that are used in the DNS system. Like, what is an A record? If you go to Cloudflare, the phrasing on their site makes it seem like an A record is an Apex record. Whereas if you go to another website, or if you ask Gemini AI, what does an A record stand for? It says A stands for address record, which makes sense, but both of them make sense. And if you go to bing.com and you type in what does A record stand for, it incorrectly states that it stands for the Apex record. But the correct answer was given by Gemini, where it states that you can have an A record that is mapped to the Apex. So you can have an Apex A record, or you can have a non-Apex A record. The use of the word Apex in this context is to describe the the base level of the domain. So basically, you can have your website, mywebsite.com, and then you can have subdomains on it, which can point to different servers, different machines, like, or even the same machine, but a different port name. Sorry, not port name, port number. And I'm already making this a little more complicated than it needs to be because I didn't explain what a port is. But you can have subdomains like blog.mywebsite.com that points to a blog, or you can have chat.mywebsite.com that points to a chat app that you run that is not part of the main website software that's running to support your website. So you can have all these different services, or you can have certain services mapped to a port, and then you map that port to a subdomain, potentially. I haven't done that recently, so I would have to double check to make sure that that is correct. So basically, you have these different DNS servers, or DNS management suites, like on Cloudflare or on whatever service you bought your your domain name on. So you like Namecheap, or you can go to Bluehost, or you can go to GoDaddy, or you can go to any of the other actual good ones. So Cloudflare is a good one. They sell them to you at cost, meaning you don't pay extra on top of whatever they have to pay the main name server registry in order to register the domain name. Like Name Silo, it's probably a good one. There's spaceship.com, they have good costs. And then, who else is there? Well, I don't know. There are all kinds of places where you can register names these days, but the best one, more than likely, is going to be Cloudflare. However, their management system is more complicated, so it may not be very user-friendly for beginners. And so beginners would want to look at something like Name Silo or DreamHost, or who knows. What's the other one? The Purple website. They just rebranded recently. It used to be called, I think, 000webhost.com. But now they're called Hostinger. Yeah, Hostinger.com. So, yeah, all of these different sites have their own interpretations of what these records are supposed to mean. Some of them don't even tell you. A lot of them put the record name in the interface, but they arrange it differently. So you can have like blog CNAME, then something else, or you can have another one that says CNAME blog whatever. So like they're taking these correlated pieces of data and they're changing what column they're in, and that doesn't seem so controversial if you've been in the web design business for a while, but to a new user that's extremely disorienting, extremely confusing. I remember being very confused with the first 2 or 3 hosting providers and names, DNS stores that I used. So unless you've been formally trained, it's going to really appear kind of disorienting to you. I think Hostinger has done a really good job of making these the systems more obvious, more relatable, and documented, and all of that kind of stuff. And right now I'm using a web host called webhostmost.com. They have high performance servers, and they're fairly intuitive, fairly user friendly, and they're clean, and they manage their servers well, and their support is actually really good. So between the options out there, I think if you wanted to get into hosting websites, making a WordPress, doing it yourself right now, you can always go with a free host to start. But if you're serious about this and you want to pay a little bit of money to get a much better product, remove a lot of space limitations, then you would want to go with WebHostMost or DreamHost or Hostinger. And then there's also A2 Hosting, which provides extremely high performance websites, but you would need to know a little more about networking and some of the older interfaces for handling a website, like cPanel. You generally need to know how to use cPanel anyway, but a lot of these hosts have good interfaces that obviate the need to use cPanel, and some of them will entirely replace cPanel and not even give you a link to cPanel, because cPanel costs money, which is funny, right? Because their interface is kind of garbage. Websites like hosts like WebHostMost, they do away with cPanel entirely. They replaced it with their own in-house management system. And then you go from WebHostMost directly to your WordPress login. And so yeah, basically what I'm trying to say is you get a totally different experience. You get a totally different learning experience when you start with different companies, and the companies, like, mentally inside your head, you have to treat them like people with idiosyncrasies. They're not one size fits all, and they don't adhere to a common visual design language to make things understandable and predictable and transposable. And I think this really inhibits the learning process and the ability to move between equivalent services. And I think maybe they do it on purpose, but in my ideal world, that would not be the case, right? It's just like standards of behavior, standards of interactivity, that kind of stuff. I mean, we need standards. And so, yeah, like inside your brain, you don't get to use a more logical way of organizing things. You have to sit there and memorize the idiosyncratic behaviors of these different providers, these different designers, and it gets overwhelming. It gets frustrating. There's too many different design choices out there, and too many different design systems, or design languages is what they usually call it. So if you're in the business of making applications or websites, I don't know, try to adhere to some very common design language choices. There are ideals, and you should really strive to adhere to them or attain them, even if they're not being currently created. That's something that can be worked on. Like, for example, recently I saw that the popular audio editing application Audacity, an open source application, is getting an overhaul on its user interface. And I think this is great. I watched a video by I think it was either the product manager or the product designer, something along those lines. It was the guy who's coordinating the overall redesign of it. Although I don't think he was the product manager, though. And that's on YouTube, and it hasn't released yet. It's going to be Audacity 4.0. They've done a huge amount of architectural work to make it extensible and future not proof exactly, but future compatible, future minded. And they did a huge overhaul of the interface, which is amazing, and they really needed it. And it uses a lot of really good user experience and user interface design principles. And you can check it out on YouTube. All you have to do is look it up. Yeah, so it really does become standard. There's a lot of industry research that goes into defining these standards, because humans, they follow a common template. So typically when you're making a program, you find it difficult to think through the eyes of the user at the same time as you're developing. And I acknowledge that this is a problem for a lot of developers. Like, for one, you can't actually get anything done if you're constantly thinking about how to improve things. I hate to say that, but it's true. And you have to be able to lock yourself into a certain design system that is generally created by the user interface toolkit that you are using. So it's really important to find comprehensive user interface toolkits so that you don't have to create everything from scratch or get locked into really bad visual metaphors and widget toolkits, or widgets in general, that don't really fit your use case. See, this was a problem with a lot of websites and apps throughout the years. It's still a problem for some of these large open source projects. This is something that I think should have been fixed a long time ago. It's really annoying to have to fit your idealized application inside your head into the confines or limitations of a badly designed user interface toolkit, or like widget toolkit. And what's really frustrating about it is a lot of these toolkits, they never get updated, and that's probably a political issue just as much as it is a technical issue or a cognitive overhead issue. So, like, even the video that I just watched, they were talking about how they used WX widgets in the original release, or the original development of Audacity. But WX widgets, while it is cross-platform and seems simple to use, it actually negatively impacts the user interface consistency between different platforms. It is similar in that way to something like React Native, where you can define the interface, but it winds up working differently and looking different on different platforms like Android and iOS. And while it may seem convenient, it also ends up turning your app into like a jigsaw puzzle. You're already solving a jigsaw puzzle, but now you have to solve the jigsaw puzzle multiple times on different platforms. And you have to include all of this exception code and like overriding code in order to get a consistent interface, if you even try to at all. And most people don't do that, so they wind up with user experiences that are broken on one platform but better on another. Yeah, so I don't know why I went on this rant today, but I was walking around enjoying the weather and it seemed like a good idea. Thanks for watching, and subscribe if you hate Microsoft. I'm kidding. No, not if you hate Microsoft. Subscribe if you like good user experience. And I don't know. Leave some comments. Tell me something interesting.